You've probably stood in the grocery aisle staring at two bags that look almost identical, white rice and brown rice, and thought, okay, which one is actually healthier? And I get it because the internet makes this feel like a life or death decision. But here's the thing that surprised me when you zoom out and look at the research. The healthier rice depends less on the color and more on your goals, your portions, and what rice is replacing in your diet. So let's make this simple, honest, and actually useful. Let's start with what these two foods really are. Brown rice is basically the whole grain. It still has the bran and germ, those outer layers where a lot of fiber, B vitamins, and minerals live. White rice is the same grain, but it's milled and polished, which removes the bran and germ, leaving mostly the starchy endosperm. That milling is why white rice tends to cook faster and taste softer, but nutritionally, it's also why it's usually lower in fiber and several micronutrients compared to brown rice. That basic head-to-head is not controversial. Whole grains generally keep more of the original package. Now, a lot of people ask, so brown rice is healthier, right? And I'd say, often yes, but not automatically. Because the biggest practical difference you're going to feel day to day is how each one affects blood sugar and hunger. White rice is typically digested faster, which means your blood sugar tends to rise more quickly after eating it. Brown rice has more fiber and a slightly lower glycemic impact on average, but this is important. The difference isn't always huge depending on the variety, how it's cooked, and what you eat with it. Some sources summarize typical glycemic index ranges with white rice, often higher, and brown rice often a bit lower, but both can still push blood sugar up, especially in larger portions. And this is where it gets interesting. The real health issue with rice in America isn't that rice is evil. It's that rice is easy to overeat. It's fluffy, it's comforting, and it doesn't always make you feel full the way higher fiber carbs do. If you're trying to lose weight or manage prediabetes, the question isn't only white or brown, it's how much and what else is on that plate. If rice is taking up half your plate and the rest is basically nothing but a little sauce, yeah, that can be a problem for appetite and glucose control. But if rice is a smaller portion and the meal has protein, veggies, maybe beans or lentils, and some healthy fat, the blood sugar response can look very different in real life. There's also a longer-term angle people care about, type 2 diabetes risk. Observational research in large US populations has linked higher white rice intake with higher risk of type 2 diabetes, while brown rice and other whole grains tend to look more favorable. Now, I want to be careful here. Observational studies can't prove that rice alone caused anything, because lifestyle patterns matter. People who eat more whole grains often do other health-supporting things too. But even with that limitation, the pattern is consistent enough that swapping refined grains for whole grains is generally seen as a smart move for metabolic health. Okay, so brown rice seems like the easy winner, except there's a twist that a lot of people don't know about: arsenic. Rice tends to absorb more arsenic from the environment than many other grains, and arsenic can concentrate in the outer layers of the grain, meaning brown rice often has higher arsenic levels than white rice. That doesn't mean you should panic after one bowl of brown rice, but it does mean whole grain doesn't automatically equal perfect, and it's a legit reason to be thoughtful about how often rice shows up in your diet, especially if you eat it daily or you're feeding little kids. Harvard's nutrition experts specifically note that brown rice tends to contain higher levels of arsenic than white rice, because arsenic accumulates in the outer layers. So what do you do with that information without spiraling? Here's the practical, sane approach. Variety and preparation matter. The FDA's guidance emphasizes varying your grains, so rice isn't your only carb every day, and paying attention to rice-based products too, like rice cereals or snacks, because arsenic exposure can add up across multiple rice products. They also note that rinsing rice has minimal effect on arsenic content, which is kind of annoying because rinsing feels like it should help more than it does. But cooking method can make a difference. Some research summaries suggest that cooking rice in excess water, kind of like pasta, then draining, can reduce arsenic levels, particularly inorganic arsenic. The trade-off is you may also lose some nutrients into the cooking water, which is another reason this isn't a one-perfect-trick situation. If you're someone who eats rice often, this is one of those small changes that can reduce exposure over time without you having to swear off rice forever. Now let's talk about the phytates conversation, because brown rice gets criticized for having phytates, compounds in the bran that can bind to minerals and reduce absorption in some contexts. And yes, phytates can lower absorption of certain minerals like iron and zinc when your diet is already low in those nutrients. But the other side of the story is that phytates also show antioxidant-like behavior in the body, and they show up naturally in many plant foods people consider healthy, like beans, nuts, and whole grains. Some researchers have explored compounds like IP6, inositol hexaphosphate, for potential anti-cancer effects, but the strongest evidence base has historically been in lab and animal data, with human evidence being much more limited and not something I'd treat like a proven cancer prevention plan. So if anyone online is making it sound like brown rice phytates will save you from cancer, that's way too confident. This is not medical advice, and if you're considering supplements like IP6, that's a conversation to have with your clinician, especially if you have iron issues or you're on medications. So where does that leave us with the original question? White rice or brown rice? What's healthier? If you're looking at it purely as a nutrient package, brown rice usually wins because it brings more fiber and more of the grain's original vitamins and minerals to the table. That can support better fullness and potentially better metabolic outcomes when it replaces refined grains in a balanced diet. But if you're someone who eats rice constantly, like multiple servings every single day, arsenic becomes a real dose matters consideration. And white rice can sometimes have lower arsenic than brown rice because the bran layer is removed. Again, not a reason to fear brown rice, just a reason not to treat it like the only healthy carb you ever eat. Rotate in other grains and starches, think oats, quinoa, barley, farro, potatoes, beans, lentils. So rice is part of your diet, not your entire diet. And here's a little real-life trick that matters more than people realize. What you pair with rice changes the whole game. Adding protein and fiber, chicken, fish, tofu, eggs, Greek yogurt on the side, beans, vegetables can blunt the blood sugar spike compared with eating a big bowl of rice alone. Also, cooling cooked rice and reheating it later can increase resistant starch in some foods, which may modestly reduce the glucose impact and feed beneficial gut bacteria. It's not magic, but it's one of those science-backed normal person strategies that can add up over time. If you're generally healthy and you just love rice, you don't need to be dramatic about it. Pick the kind you enjoy, keep portions reasonable, and build meals that aren't just rice plus sauce. If you're trying to lose weight, manage triglycerides, or you've been told you're insulin resistant, you'll probably do better treating rice, white or brown, as a smaller side rather than the main event. And if you're eating rice every day, consider mixing up your grains and using cooking methods that may lower arsenic exposure over time. So my honest bottom line, brown rice is usually the better default if you're choosing between the two, because it's closer to the whole food and tends to be more filling. But white rice isn't automatically bad, especially if it's an occasional comfort food, paired well, portioned well, and your overall diet is solid. The healthiest choice is the one that fits your body, your labs, your lifestyle, and your ability to stick with it, because consistency beats perfection every single time. If this helped you think about rice in a totally different way, hit subscribe. Because every week I break down nutrition science like this. What the research actually says, what it doesn't say, and how to turn it into something you can use in real life without going crazy.